If I had been more careful when choosing a place to live that day, I probably wouldn't have woken up on an operating table. It started 3 months ago when I decided to leave Cleveland, Ohio. My job had fallen apart, and my rent was piling up. I needed a fresh start somewhere with a lower cost of living. Dayton seemed like a good fit. It was a quiet city, and still in the same state, so I could visit family. The first thing I needed to do was find a place to live. I scrolled through apartment and rental pages, and most of them were out of my reach. Then I saw a post looking for a roommate. It was a 2-bedroom apartment on Oak Street, near downtown, with a rent that was half the average price. The apartment currently had one occupant, a guy named Vince, who made the post. We exchanged a few simple messages, and I quickly moved in with him. On moving day, I parked my rental truck in front of a 3-story red brick building. The apartment was on the 2nd floor. Vince opened the door after the first knock. He was tall and thin with long brown hair that almost covered his eyes. The first thing that struck me was Vince's unusually wide smile. His voice was a little high-pitched and slightly shaky. His hand was cold and clammy when we shook hands. Vince didn't say much about himself, and I was hesitant to ask. The apartment was bigger than I expected. A large living room with a window overlooking the street. The kitchen was small but functional. My bedroom had a single bed and a wardrobe. There was a faint, musty, foul smell. I figured it was because the room hadn't been used. The first few days passed quite peacefully. I worked the afternoon and evening shift at a restaurant near downtown, usually getting home around 11 p.m. Vince was usually in his room with the door closed. The musty, foul odor I noticed at first didn't go away. It became more and more pronounced. I opened the windows and lit scented candles, but it didn't help. The smell was especially strong near Vince's room. On a day off when Vince was also home, I couldn't stand the smell anymore, so I asked him about it. Vince, who was in the kitchen, turned back with that familiar smile and explained that he was working on a dissection research project on small animals like rats and birds. He wanted to understand their internal structure. Better rats than people, right? Vince chuckled softly and walked into his room. I stood there watching him go, thinking my roommate was incredibly strange. After living with Vince for almost a month, I decided to find another place. I had saved enough money for a security deposit. I told Vince about it, and he didn't say anything, but he did mention he was going home to visit his family that weekend. I figured he wasn't happy about me moving out, so I just kept quiet. I breathed a sigh of relief, finally getting a quiet night to myself. That evening, as I was sitting on the sofa, I was startled by a sound at the front door. I turned off the TV and listened. It was a key turning in the lock. Maybe Vince had come home early. I stood up, ready to greet him. The door opened, but instead of Vince, I saw a tall, dark figure in a hoodie, his face covered by a white mask. Before I could react, he lunged. I tried to run to the kitchen, but my foot caught the edge of the table, and I tumbled to the floor. In the next second, a strong blow to my head sent me into darkness. When I woke up, I found myself tied tightly to a metal table. I was in a small room with no windows, lit by a single overhead bulb. The concrete walls were bare and damp. The stench was so overwhelming it made me want to throw up. Around the table were metal shelves full of glass jars. Inside were dark brown fragments, suspended in a clear fluid. On another table, I saw surgical tools, scalpels, pliers, scissors. My mouth was taped shut, leaving me to only make muffled sounds of helplessness. From a dark corner, a voice began to hum a sweet melody that, in this context, was horrifying. The singer emerged from the shadows and walked closer. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Vince with his familiar smile. But this time, it was more grotesque, with wide, bulging eyes filled with a look of sheer delight. Better people than rats, right, Mike? Without a word, he picked up a folding knife from the tool table and opened it. Vince placed the tip of the blade on the skin of my stomach. I tensed, struggling in desperation. The blade began to cut into my skin. and a searing pain hit me, feeling the warm blood ooze out. I was helpless and so desperate I started to cry. Suddenly, I felt the rope on my right wrist loosen slightly, probably because I was sweating so much. I tried to twist my wrist. Vince had turned away to grab a tool, mumbling something about a perfect specimen. After a few minutes of struggling, my right hand finally came free. I immediately sat up, grabbed a knife from the tool table, and stabbed him in the shoulder. Vince screamed, stumbling backward, clutching his shoulder. He became enraged at the sight of his own blood, yelling hysterically. I quickly untied myself and ran. After I got out, I realized that the horror room was Vince's bedroom. I pressed hard on the wound to stop the bleeding, staggering down the deserted street. I saw a light at a nearby house and crawled toward it. I pounded on the door. A middle-aged woman opened it. She was in a panic when she saw my state. "Please, call the police." I managed to give her my apartment address before collapsing. I woke up in the hospital. A police detective was sitting next to my bed. He told me Vince had been arrested. In the basement, they found more than 20 glass jars containing body parts. Not just from animals. They believed some were human, as they also found photos. Some of them were of victims who had gone missing several years ago. According to forensic reports and medical records, Vince had been diagnosed with paranoid disorder and dissociative personality disorder, but he had never followed through with treatment. He was reclusive, rarely socialized, and had a tendency to become obsessed with human anatomy and controlling others' bodies. The untreated mental illness was the cause of his insane behavior and horrifying crimes. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. My wound wasn't deep, but I lost a lot of blood and needed time to recover psychologically. After being discharged, I found a new place to live. This time, I was much more careful. I met the landlord in person, checked all the paperwork, and talked to the neighbors before making a decision. Vincent Miller was sentenced to life in prison without parole. During the trial, he still had that grotesque smile, as if the whole thing was just an interesting game. I know I was lucky that I didn't become the next living specimen in his horrifying collection. I'm Oscar, 26 years old, living alone in New York. Because I have an online job and have free time, I often sleep during the day and then work at night. In recent months, a 7-Eleven convenience store opened near my house. I really enjoy being able to buy food at night while working. A man named David, 45 years old, is the owner of the store. David is recruiting staff and temporarily looks after this place. David designed a room at the back of the store to provide a comfortable place to rest. He was funny and kind. Sometime later, the store had another female employee. Her appearance is not very outstanding, but her way of talking attracted me. Her name is Mary, 26 years old, and she is Mr. David's niece. Gradually, I stopped by the convenience store several times a day to talk to Mary. I started to see that Mary had feelings for me, but David gradually became more grumpy every time he saw me. I guess David is upset because I'm affecting Mary's work. He met me privately and harshly asked me to stay away from Mary. David gave the reason that he did not want Mary to be in danger when getting acquainted with strangers. It's ironic that Mary is old enough to make her own decisions about her life. Of course, I didn't listen to David. Since that tense conversation, David continuously appeared at the store. It's like he's guarding Mary and I so we don't have a chance to come into contact. Many times I asked Mary out to have her own space. She happily accepted, but then always had a reason to refuse. One day I stayed up late to meet a deadline and felt hungry. I went to the convenience store. There was no one inside. I called out to David, and he didn't answer. I walked around and then accidentally stopped at the door leading to the room at the back of the store. Just as I was about to approach the door, it suddenly opened, loudly. Mary walked out, looking haggard, her clothes disheveled. She smiled very awkwardly at me. raised her hand to close the door, not giving me a chance to look inside. I was extremely surprised to see Mary. This was not her shift. Looking at Mary's body, I still saw bruises. I asked worriedly, but she avoided my eyes and said she was fine. That night, I no longer had enough concentration and spirit to work. I always think about Mary and many questions pop up in my head. The following days, I did not see David appear again. Mary said that David had an accident and broke his leg so he would stay home and rest for a while. Supervising and operating the store will be in charge of Mary. She will stay at the store and use David's room. Mr. David also recruited an additional employee, a middle-aged woman named Joan. Mary and I became a couple not long after. Unlike other couples, our date spot is always a convenience store. Mary never let me or Miss Joan into the back room of the store. One time, I used the restroom at the store. After draining the water, I saw something floating back. It looked like meat and had a very unpleasant smell. I guess the pipe was clogged. This must be leftover food someone had flushed down. This condition lasted for several weeks afterward. Not only the toilet, the store's drain was also clogged. I wanted to handle this for Mary, but she said she would do it herself. It's been a while since David returned to the store. Mary also did not care much for her uncle. The next strange thing is that Ms. Joan also disappeared after nearly a month of working here. That day, Mary and I were at the store when the police came to investigate Ms. Joan's disappearance. Mary happily cooperated and said she had resigned from the store a week before the missing information was reported. One time, I went to the store looking for Mary, but couldn't find her. I couldn't hold back my curiosity anymore, so I decided to enter the room at the back of the store to find her. The space inside is very stuffy and dark. I smelled clearly the smell of disinfectant and cleaning fluid. There was something in the corner of the room. I approached it and saw it was a chainsaw. Do convenience stores also use this? "What are you doing here?" Mary shouted loudly, startling me. She stood in the doorway, staring at me and full of anger. Before I could react, Mary immediately kicked me out and slammed the door. I returned home with all kinds of surprise and helpless emotions inside me. The next day, the convenience store closed. I also completely lost contact with Mary. About a week passed. I was worried and couldn't do anything. I decided to report to the police and then received a call from the police. They asked me to come to the station to cooperate in the investigation of the murder of 2 people. Strange things happened all at once. I fell into extreme confusion. The police questioned me about my connection to the woman named Mary. I replied, "She is my girlfriend." Police said she is missing and is the prime suspect for the murder. The first victim is David, who she claims is her uncle, who is actually her lover. Currently, the police have only found Mr. David's head and hands hidden in the room behind the store. They are still looking for other parts of the body. The next victim was Ms. Joan. The police found her body in the same room, wrapped neatly in a very large bag, with her limbs severed. Police suspect that the chainsaw in the room was the tool she used to perform the dismemberment process. I was shocked to hear the information from the police. I remembered all of Mary's strange expressions over the past time. Her carefree appearance that night. Maybe he just did something bad to Mr. David. What I saw in the toilet was most likely his flesh. Ms. Joan is also likely to be murdered. When she learns the horrifying truth about Mr. David, police are still actively searching for Mary. I feel scared and disgusted that I have loved a devil all this time.